So then we have this model then that it's very much a developmental thing to be Machiavellian, and that it doesn't necessarily stop at the end of childhood. Now, the term Machiavellian comes from the name Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli. You're very precise about pronunciation, which is good.
Yes.
Wrote The Prince. People come across these books as adults. Robert Greene is a friend of the show, wrote The 48 Laws of Power. People come across these. Can literature stir a person's conscience or disturb a person's conscience and change them into a Machiavellian?
Absolutely. At least with respect to some tendencies. I don't know if it ever is powerful enough to move the needle from, a completely good-hearted, trusting, honest person to a raging Machiavellian, but it would move the needle somewhat. I've read parts of Robert Greene's book, a lot of Robert Greene's book. I really enjoyed it. I've read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I've read The Art of War. I've read The Prince. A lot of them advocate for some of these duplicitous tactics. They don't, obviously looking out for number one is another one. Forget the author at the moment, but a lot of them argue for very much the same thing: is that don't criticize somebody unnecessarily, keep people on your side, build these coalitions. Sometimes it's advantageous to not look to appear the same way you're going to actually behave. So, and I want to be crystal clear that yes, they can move the needle in the way people think. Even a 12-minute TED Talk can do that in planting a seed. One of my favorite movies, Inception, would say the most infectious thing on the planet is an idea, right? And so we can plant these ideas in people's head. And so that's why I think it's also equally important to inoculate people to going down the path of unethical action and say, okay, there's at some point, and that's why I say even with my CBR training and the stuff that I do in that realm, I always emphasize you should not be doing this if somebody is playing by the rules of engagement. They're being benevolent or they have integrity or anything like that, or everyday associations. These are very isolated tactics for very isolated specific situations where you're dealing with somebody who doesn't engage in those rules of engagement, and you do it temporarily till you can get away. Because ultimately somebody who does CBR in perpetuity, even though it doesn't directly tell people to manipulate, and I don't want people manipulating, we don't need more jerks in this world, but that's why I say temporarily till you can get away, because ultimately if you're doing CBR for 30 years with your boss, you're going to put yourself at greater risk for ethical slippage. And I don't want to see that happen to anybody. So yeah, to that point, you go down the path of unethical behavior, that it was a seed planted from a book or stuff like that. And I think if you look at 48 Laws of Power, you can apply so many of those principles to the greater good. If you look at Dale Carnegie's book, you can apply so many of those principles to the greater good. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And so I don't think necessarily that people who are thinking strategically and maybe a little more utilitarian are evil and are always inflicting harm on the planet. And one of my favorite papers in a journal called Leadership Quarterly by an author named DeLuga ranked the first 39 presidents of the United States using historians and psychological experts on Machiavellianism. And what he found was the number one most Machiavellian president we've ever had in history was also the one credited for saving us from recession, depression, and falling into fascism, which was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. Most Machiavellian president, also the only president to get 3 terms. Was he inflicting harm on the United States? No, I'd argue that the influence of his presidency was positive and long-lasting. But if you dig into the personal details, he used duplicity and deception to manipulate certain folks into getting what he needed. So was he pure evil? No. But did he have Machiavellian tendencies? Absolutely. So again, I'm not advocating for manipulation, but I'm saying that if somebody's goals align with a particular outcome that is pro-social, and they're bending rules to get that done, some people would find that appealing.
Yeah. I do want to get into the red flags of trying to spot a Machiavellian, which sounds actually
Yes,
extremely difficult as we're getting clearer on that. But
it is.
first, I'm curious. So with your CBR model, cold, bottom line, rational, did that come from researching Machiavellians? And the idea was to
Yes,
sort
it
of
did.
to turn, but without becoming like them. I mean, that sounds like a villain's path a lot of the time.
Right.
Is, oh, I'm just gonna take from the bad guys until eventually you become one. So how did that all come about?
That's a really great question.
To go even deeper on these ideas, you can watch my full episode using the link in the description or the box on the screen.